Hey everybody, welcome back to James Draws Everything. Today continuing our Drawing Every Country in the World's Flag series, and we're going back into the southern part of Africa, over on the coast of the Indian Ocean. Between South Africa and Tanzania, we're going to be doing Mozambique. Right, so Mozambique has a gun on their flag. So right off the bat, that's kind of cool. I think it's the only country. It's not the only country that has a weapon, but it does have a rifle on the flag. And this country does, unfortunately, have a pretty intense, violent history. But we'll get to that. Mozambique, in the southern part of Africa. As there's like the Bantu expansions in earlier history, you get a lot of traders showing up from like Egypt, Ethiopia, Somalia, Arabs, Persians, and as well as Indians, right? Because it is on the Indian Ocean. So it does become a bit of a desirable locale for trade, and then that kind of plays into its colonial identity much later on. Okay, just want to figure out kind of where I want my stuff to go here. So it does have like a tricolor bar, but there's like a little white space in between the colors. The Portuguese, Vasco da Gama, right, one of the great Portuguese explorers. They arrive around 1500, a little before that, and they take the land from the Arabs around that same time, and they set up their own colonies. One of the longest lived colonies in Africa. The Portuguese colonies are actually there until 1975. And if you want to know a little bit more about Portuguese empire and colonization, as well as the later Estado Novo period under Salazar, you can check out my Portugal episode. Portugal right over here. So a few days ago we did that one. I was very proud of that episode, so please check it out and let me know what you think. Portuguese Empire is kind of downplayed now because Portugal isn't really seen as like a major force in world events. Much more important than we give it credit for, though. So yes, check out that episode. The prazos are what Portugal sets up there. Prazos are basically like estates, kind of like land deeds for the settlers and traders that wind up there. So Portugal is creating an economic incentive for people to go there and cultivate the land. Right? You got to remember too, this is not like when we talk about colonialism, the goofy versions that you're always taught in school and through every form of media, basically, is that we just European powers just showed up and just started executing people left and right and slaughtering them and this and that. South Africa, not the country, but just southern Africa in general, mostly uninhabited, right up until like the colonial period. You have very scattered tribes, in certain areas, but there was not like developed civilizations like there was in, say, North Africa or Egypt, or so. A little bit different than kind of what you're told. So the Portuguese, they set up a relatively stable colony there. And you also remember with Portugal, the way they viewed some of their colonies were almost not as like really colonies, but actual parts of Portugal, at least with Brazil. and that was always kind of a goal in Portuguese Africa, the African Empire of Portugal. But they never really succeeded as well as, I guess, some of the other colonial powers did. A big part of that was that Mozambique is, on the Indian Ocean, right? That opens up a lot of Indian trade because Portugal was also expanding into Southeast Asia, India, China. Hold on one second here. Let me just get the right marker. Okay. Where was I? Oh yeah, so the Portuguese are kind of blocked here by the British, right? So Portuguese also have Angola, and so that's on the Atlantic coast of Africa, right? And they always had the idea of joining those two colonies, right? So that you had like a convenient method to go from one Portuguese land to another. Britain kind of they're always sort of friendly with the Portuguese, but they kind of throw their weight around in Africa, and Portugal sort of gets left in the dust there. That never really happens. Portugal, later on, kind of going into the industrial era, they treat these colonies as investments, right? So kind of like what the British are doing with we're South Africa, right? It's not really like a colony proper. It's basically a corporation, right? The British South African Company. Rhodesia was a little bit similar, but Portugal had the Mozambique Company in the early 20th century, which kind of goes defunct as Portugal's empire sort of collapses, much with the rest of Africa. So the getting into the 20th century, of course, Portugal, Salazar, kind of holds back a leftist takeover of Portugal. There, the Portuguese Republic collapses. It's kind of like a leftist republic in Portugal. That you kind of see a lot of stuff like that popping up in the 20th century, right? 20th century liberalism. Portugal it doesn't return really to monarchy, right? Under Salazar, it has the Estado Novo, right? The new state. So much more of an emphasis on these colonies as corporations, and pluricontinentalism. Again, kind of means that was a philosophy during the Salazar era. Basically means that again, these are all part of Portugal proper, right? So they're not foreign possessions or anything like that. The goal was to create a pluricontinental Portugal. So with they'd already lost Brazil by that point, but with some of their other possessions that they still had. And then just due to what else is due to some of the other things that are going on in Africa, right? You got a lot of communist subversion. Mozambique is no different. Mozambique, there was an instance where they put down some protesters, and then that really kind of inflamed tensions there, and it led to a lot of violence against the Portuguese. To the Portuguese's credit, they actually held on to their African empire a lot longer than most. So this is where you kind of see this is interesting because the Western world, you're taught that during the Cold War, these are the capitalist powers versus the communist powers, which isn't really true. And what I always say to that is that you look at places like Mozambique or definitely Rhodesia, and they were very obviously being taken over by communists, and you had a much more like sort of like an ancestral, sort of like these are your people there, right? You have much more of an interest there than say like Vietnam, but we left a lot of these African countries. We let them fall into communist hands while we're while we're talking about the evils of communism and whatnot, and then we're not doing anything to help these guys who we have much more strategic ties with, and a lot of common ancestry and whatnot. So the Cold War is much more complicated as well. So Mozambique, unfortunately, does fall to the communists, and you can already tell because I'm drawing a star on the flag, and you know what that means. And so Portugal, they achieve independence, right? So this isn't entirely related to what's going on internally in Mozambique, right? Because Portugal has the Carnation Revolution, which ends the Estado Novo of Salazar. Salazar was already deceased by that point, but his legacy is kind of crapped on after that as well. So Portugal becomes just another liberal Western power. They have to give up all of their African possessions. Again, they did put up a fight, but yeah, the world kind of turns their back on them, and Mozambique becomes independent 1975. And then, of course, what do you think happens almost immediately? 2 years into independence, you have a civil war. Okay, because you have a communist guerrilla uprising. And this group is called Frelimo. I think I'm pronouncing that right. It does stand for Front for the Liberalization of Mozambique, right? So sounds great on paper, but of course that's all those Marxist groups do. And there is a resistance there, Renamo, the Mozambique National Resistance. So that's an anti-communist group that does get some support and funding, like from neighboring Rhodesia. Because all these countries now realize that the entire world has them on the chopping block, and it's I always like to point this out too. Who do you think is in these groups, right? It's like, oh, well, it's all the white capitalists versus the black freedom fighting communists, right? The good kind of communists. No, plenty of black support in the anti-communist movements, right? It's not all cut and dry. There were a lot that didn't want to see their country destroyed by communism, and they fought with those powers. So Mozambique, no different, right? We've done quite a few of these African countries by now, so you guys kind of know the song and dance of what happens. So Mozambique, the communists unfortunately win. They put up a fight against them, but they had backing from the USSR, and the two-faced United States and Western powers, talked a big game about fighting communism, but didn't do a damn thing when it came to protecting Africa from communism. So country basically goes to hell for the next 30 years. Mass starvation, mass death. But again, this is the Communist Greatest Hits album. So if you like communism, massive starvation, hyperinflation, death, unemployment, those are all the great songs that communism sings wherever it goes. It's its greatest hits. No different in anywhere in the world. Now the flag is it is actually influenced by Marxism. Even though the Soviet Union falls in the early 90s, Frelimo was the ruling party there. They abandoned Marxism in 1989, set up a new constitution. There's still a lot of low-level violence though between Frelimo and Renamo. The two factions, the communists and the anti-communists. So Mozambique never really got back on track from when it was granted independence, when it was a functioning state under the Portuguese. So that is unfortunate, but unfortunately that is how it goes. And I'm sure this is not the last time we're going to be hitting those notes when it comes to these independence movements. So now as well, in Mozambique, you have a very strong ISIS presence, right? Because of all the, I'm not going to get completely into like modern Mozambique geopolitical issues and whatnot, but when you create all this instability and you're relocating a lot of people through civil wars, not just in Mozambique, but in neighboring areas, you're going to get a lot of these nasty elements pop up, right? So it's like not cleaning a wound. You know, what do you think is going to happen if you just let it, if you let it fester and get infected? You know, these things, they rise up and they're always nasty. So we'll see what happens with Mozambique. It is still at a very strategically important place in that part of the world, right? It's kind of the bridge between Africa and India. So it'll always at least have that going for it strategically, and it's got a pretty radical flag here, right, with the AR on it. So what does the Mozambique flag mean, James? So it's got the 3 equal stripes, the yellow 5-pointed star, has a crossed rifle and a hoe. Not that kind of hoe. Keep your mind out of the gutter. Garden hoe. And it's got an open white book behind it. And then the green, it's kind of like a darker green, represents the riches of the land. These 2 little white bars in between represent peace. Black, the continent of Africa and its people. Yellow, the country's minerals. Whew, a lot here. Red, the struggle for independence. You know what red always means, the blood and the metal, the heavy metal of the country. And the rifle, that means defense and vigilance. The gardening tool, keep your mind out of the gutter, refers to the country's agriculture. And the open book stresses the importance of education. And the star, again, represents Marxism. So kind of a big mess of stuff there. And don't let me forget, I just have to label our flag here. So that is Mozambique. And I always like saying Mozambique. You know, it's kind of one of those countries where the name just kind of flows off the tongue. Mozambique. Mozambique. It's fun to say. All right, so what do you think about Mozambique? Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I will catch you on the next video.